This is a Silmarillion Lord of the Rings crossover podfic of It's Been a Long Time by Solitary Bird, read for you by Solitary Bird. This fic is rated G. Ulmo has been holding the way to Valinor open for the few remaining stragglers still living in Middle-earth for years. Way longer than he had ever intended to, because of several Eldar that just refused to leave. It had become a legitimate security threat, even though Ulmo held the way closed when it wasn't actively being used, until they decided it was time to shuffle their way over the sea at a snail's pace to Elvenhome. So much so that he's taken to making a note on his calendar to fight Manwë about not closing it weekly on Tuesdays. His king is determined that the way should be permanently closed to prevent future problems of elves trying to escape back to Middle-earth and men stumbling across Valinor. Closing it so means abandoning the elves still stubbornly refusing to come home, and Ulmo refuses to do so. Too many times have the children felt abandoned by them. There is no need to make those thoughts reality. Closing the way would essentially ensure that death was the only way for them to travel over the sea. Ulmo was very against this path of action, and he would put up with Manwë's attempts to strong-arm him into doing so until everyone finally left Arda behind. The problem was he was currently standing at the door waiting on one elf who would not come, no matter how strong the call of the waves were. One, it wasn't even Thranduil. No, it was Maglor, who was still moping around the seashore and refusing to come home, out of regret or self-pity or something similarly misplaced, because it couldn't possibly be the oath holding him there anymore, not after the long years that had passed. The Silmaril he'd thrown into the sea had been so eroded by wave action over the thousands of years that all that was left of it was merely glittering sand. Strewn across the beaches of the world, there was not enough left of it to hold onto either the oath or the curse. His brothers were reborn and walking around Aman. Celebrimbor had even started making rings again without having flashbacks to the Second Age. None of them felt the urge to regather the stolen stones of Fëanor, though Namo argued that might be because they had fulfilled the whole dying part of the oath, and Maglor had not. Fëanor was even up for imminent release from the halls, and the Teleri had nothing against it, not even those who had once died in the kinslaying. There was no reason Maglor should torture himself any longer. All sins had been forgiven by time, though that was maybe too simple a way to explain the healing that had taken place. Ulmo held out on closing the way for another 4,000 years, but by then humans developed space travel, and well, he'd had to intervene pretty forcefully. Things had been getting entirely too ridiculous, or he'd had Ossë do what he should have done 12 ages ago. Wait until Maglor's aimless wanderings bring him to some uninhabited piece of coastline, then chuck a huge wave at him and drag him back. It worked perfectly, too. Ulmo hadn't seen a better tsunami than that since the sinking of Beleriand. Next time he saw Ossë, he'd have to bring that dwarven moonshine he'd been hoarding and share it with him for a job well done. Nerdnell meets her son on the shore. She's alone, but that doesn't mean the rest of her sons didn't want to be here with her. This meeting is for Maglor and her alone. A mother and the only son who didn't die, though Maglor had long lived like he had indeed died back in the First Age. Ulmo could hear their reunion over the sound of the water rushing backwards into the sea. Nerdnell was informing her second-born that he, along with all her other children, was going to be permanently grounded. They'd put her through hell and gone through that, and more themselves. "You're never leaving my sight again," Nerdnell chastised her son, as if he were little less than a babe gone missing at a market. Then she seemed to catch herself, and added quickly, "Well, not permanently, but for at least 2,000 years, Maglor. We have so many things to say, and so many tears still to cry." Maglor turned his face away from the waters for the first time in millennia, and said with a voice cracked and strained from lack of use, "Mother, can we go home?" "Of course we can, Laure. Yelpy, Grandpa Marthan, and all your brothers are waiting for you. She's even made a cake." The end. Author's notes. Your Maglor won't come home. Use big wave. It's super effective. There. Thank you for listening.